the Jet Setting Wealth Advisory Podcast, where your financial journey takes flight with David T.U. As an airline pilot and financial expert, David merges the aviation industry and wealth management to help you navigate today's complex financial skies. Each episode features expert insight, blending personal stories with essential financial strategies. We ask that you fasten your seatbelts and sit back as we prepare for takeoff. Our destination, your financial empowerment.
Welcome to the Jet Setting Wealth Advisory Podcast. I'm your host, David T.U., and today's guest is someone whose name is synonymous with aviation safety, Captain John Cox. With over 55 years in aviation, John has served as a corporate, commercial airline and test pilot, instructor, and respected safety professional. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Safety after a distinguished 25 years of flying career at U.S. Airways, which is now American Airlines, where he has logged over 14,000 flight hours. John shifted his focus to improving safety on a global scale, advising airlines, regulators, manufacturers, and even public utilities through his consulting firm. John's worked and has helped shape modern safety management system across industries, and his deep commitment to aviation safety has earned him numerous accolades, including the FAA Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award and the Flight Safety Foundation's Laura Tabor Barber Award. You'll likely have met him and seen him on numerous different contributors on NBC, CNBC, MSNBC, and also one of my favorite shows, Air Disasters. In today's episode, we'll talk with Captain Cox about the evolution of aviation safety, the real-world impact of risk management systems, and how leadership in safety translate across sectors. So welcome, John. We're so happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you for the invitation.
So let's get started. John, 55 years in aviation is extraordinary. I only have about 30 years. What first draw you to the skies, and then what led you from the cockpit into becoming one of the most prominent figures in aviation safety?
I learned to fly when I was really pretty young. I soloed at 16 and got a private license at 17. I was flying professionally for a Fortune 500 company when I was 19 years old. A lot of things worked in my favor in that way. I got hired at Piedmont Airlines when I was 26, checked out as a captain and an instructor when I was 29. So it's been sort of a fast-paced career with a lot of different facets to it. After being on the F-28 program at Piedmont, I rotated back to the 737, and U.S. Air had a number of accidents, and I was involved with the Airline Pilots Association safety structure by then. So I ended up as one of the accident investigators. That really got me started to global aviation safety. U.S. Air in the early 2000s had been through 2 bankruptcies. Our pension was gone. There was a bunch of things going on. And I had a group in New York contact me and said, if you will come run this company, we will finance it. Not wanting to be with a failing airline and potentially being out of work, I'd elected to take that. And that was 20 years ago. So from there, we've worked on 6 continents. We've worked with regulators around the world. We've worked with airlines around the world, corporate operators, maintenance facilities, and then taken the safety management piece into the public utility world, helping them utilize some of the aviation safety successes that they could utilize in another error-intolerant industry, the movement of natural gas and electricity.
I see. Okay. So after retiring from U.S. Airways, you founded Aviation Operations Systems. What was your vision when starting the firm? So how has this particular company evolve as you've expanded into so many different sectors?
I think like a lot of startups, you have a vision and things don't turn out that way at all. So we had a vision of doing a lot of safety audits and increasing the size of the organization significantly and being one of the industry leaders in safety audit. We found that the market and the field was pretty full. So we had to expand out and to do more of the traditional consulting work And that took us to some regulators. I mean, we worked with the UK CAA, we worked with the EASA, and so we were doing a lot of work internationally as well as domestic US and Canada. So it's when you find an opening in the market as a startup, you take it and you adapt. And so over the 20 years, we have become much more focused on emergency response planning, and we found that there is a real market and a need for that. There are really very few companies that can help organizations, notably with aviation accidents, but really crisis management, to successfully navigate that while protecting the brand. So, the last few years, that's been one of our increasing focuses.
You mentioned the term UASA at the beginning when I had asked you the question. Can you identify what that is for
Oh, yes,
listeners and viewers,
the
please?
EASA, it's the European Aviation Safety Agency. So it's
Fantastic.
the European equivalent.
Of the FAA. Okay, got it. So you were one of the earliest advocates for safety management systems, SMS, not just in aviation, but also in gas, electric, and even media organizations. Why is SMS so critical in an error intolerant industry such as these?
The SMS really started in the UK. And there was a Dr. James Reason that was one of the academics that really began to lay the foundation for it. The Canadians recognized early on the benefits, and they became very strong advocates for the adoption of SMS within the airlines. The US was much slower. The FAA began to promote it, but not require it. But as we began to see people like British Airways and Air Canada, KLM, Lufthansa, they were having successes in better managing risk and making risk more objective and being more proactive. The successes of SMS became more and more apparent. US Air, American Airlines, and a couple of others then began to really adopt it. I was fortunate for working with the Airline Pilots Association safety group that I was part of that team that helped put SMS together at US Air. So I got sort of an inside view in the early days of what it takes a large, complex organization to successfully put one of these in. But as the
Mhm.
data rolled in, it became obvious that SMS is an effective, objective way to manage risk. Consequently, the number of serious incidents and accidents went down. And one of the causal factors to that was SMS. So we've then taken that into the corporate world and even into the public utilities. The data's there, it works. So it's been a success story.
Okay. For private operators, corporation aviation teams, or business owners with airplanes and aircrafts, how would this SMS help prevent problems before they start? And how does it differ from traditional safety protocols?
A couple of things. One, the Europeans and a number of other countries have now said if you are a corporate operator, be commercial, non-commercial, that you must have a safety management system and it must be approved.
Mhm.
But they also went to some standards organizations and said, we will accept your set of standards. So this became a catalyst for operators to adopt these standards, and part of which being is to demonstrate the documentation and implementation of a defined safety management system. So that became sort of the cattle in the business aviation world. The Europeans have now required that just about everybody have a safety management system. They show data that says there is a quantifiable decrease in accidents and serious incidents with SMS operators. So the US is moving in that direction.
Okay.
The on-demand air taxis are now being required to have SMS. The Part
Okay.
139 airports now have SMS. You're seeing maintenance and repair organizations move toward SMS. And so the flight schools, I think you'll see them in short order. So it's becoming as much a part of aviation as a wing. It's becoming just part of how we manage an environment. And really, if you think about it, we really do manage an incredible amount of risk, and we do it very, very effectively. It's the safest form of transportation ever designed by humankind. So utilizing an effective means of managing risk is essential, and SMS is just that.
Understand. So, in your experience, how do organizations or certain organizations unintentionally sabotage their own safety programs?
Oh, the classic statements that I listen for, particularly as an auditor, oh, we're safe, we've never had an accident. I just want to turn around and walk out the door because you know that they're looking backwards and not forwards. Two is we've always done it that way and it's always worked.
Mm,
So you hear that
yes.
one from time to time.
Heard of all these, all
Yes,
chiming into my ear here.
yes. The other one is that, well, we manage safety pretty effectively. And so we don't we don't like the intrusion of an SMS and it's too expensive. To which my answer is if you think an aviation safety program is expensive, try an accident or a serious incident because you can run into the millions of dollars extremely quickly. So all of those things. And then if you walk into a hangar and there are power cords all over the floor, the fire
Mm,
extinguishers aren't up to date, there are ladders lying around, it's dirty. The culture is not a safety oriented culture. If you
sure.
ask them, so how many hazard reports have you had in the last couple of years? And they go, what's a hazard report? They're not a reporting culture.
Got it.
So, there's certain key things that you look for that an effective safety organization is a just culture, it's a
Mhm.
learning culture, it's a reporting culture, it's a proactive culture. And when you see those components, that's an organization that can effectively deal with planned and known risks, but also plan or unplanned and unknown hazards that may come up. That's the sort of organization that gives us the very low incident and accident rate that we enjoy today.
You teach aviation safety at the University of South Carolina. What are
Southern
some?
California.
I'm sorry, it is USC. Okay, USC, University of Southern California. What are some of the biggest mindset shifts you try to instill in students and professionals when it comes to operating in high reliability environments?
I've been teaching there something over 15 years. We've had students from all over the world. And the understanding of how to evaluate, assess risk, then how to formally utilize a formal program to mitigate risk, and then what is an acceptable level of risk. And that varies from organization to organization. And I can give you the two bookends if you like. But
Sure.
how you get there is really more important than the decision that you make. The two bookends are Air Force One.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most risk adverse organization on the planet. It
Sure.
doesn't matter what it costs, they will spend it to reduce risk to as low as possible.
Sure.
The other end of it is a friend of mine who routinely flies about 8 feet off the ground and cuts a ribbon with the tail of her airplane as she's flying by inverted. It happens that she's a four-time national aerobatics champion. She mitigates to an acceptable level of risk based on her skill and her experience. So, where do you fit between those two bookends?
Yes.
That's a question that I ask a lot of clients. And I don't care what their answer is, I care about how they got there.
Okay. Very interesting. I love the two book example. You've investigated or at least analyzed countless aviation accidents. What have you learned about the intersection of human error, systems failure, and organizational culture?
If you go back to the 40s and the 50s, airplanes were wonderful, but they were really at the cutting edge of technology. We were transitioning into the jets. The single greatest improvement in aviation safety is the incorporation of the jet engine. And that was a quantum leap in safety because turbine engines are so much more reliable
Sure.
than the old piston engines. So when you look at it, there were airplane issues in the 50s and into the 60s. When you got into the 70s and early 80s, there were a lot of pilot issues. There were things that pilots were making mistakes. The United DC-8 that ran out of fuel going into Portland, Oregon. Two of the three pilots knew they were critically low on fuel. But the captain being the captain in those days, the authority gradient was so great, he didn't listen to them. And they ended up running this 4-engine intercontinental jet out of fuel. That led to the advent of crew resource management.
Yep.
So we started improving the pilots. And then when we got later into the late 90s and 2000s, we started looking at the organizations, the operators. And
Okay.
that's where safety management came in. So we started with the airplanes, then we fixed the pilots, now the organization. So there have been at 3 major areas of focus that have all contributed to the very low accident rate we have today.
Okay. So can you give us a real world example of where implementing lessons from an accident investigation led to major improvements in safety and operations?
If you look at things such as the Boeing 737, most widely used commercial jet ever made, it had a very rare in the design, it was an unintended consequence of the design of the main rudder. But on occasion, it would move by itself, uncommanded, or actually reversed command. It
Wow.
happened to United Airlines, it happened to US Air, and it happened to a small airline no longer in existence called Eastwinds. So it was an extremely difficult investigation. It went on for 5 years, but we did solve it. And as such, every 737 in the world, which is about 12,000 airplanes, was modified and corrected, and it's never done it again.
Okay.
So when you look at another one that I mentioned, the Portland DC-8, out of that came crew resource management, which is the only way the United Airlines DC-10 that landed in Sioux City, Iowa, was able to get on the ground. It was the very effective leadership of Captain Al Haynes, who I was fortunate to know. No, he
Okay.
passed away some years ago now.
Okay.
Great guy. But in any event, when you he took the lessons of CRM and applied it in a very high stress situation and was successful. So those are two, one human and one technical, that where we've utilized it. Aviation learns more from the incidents and accidents. We spend more money, we spend more time, we spend more effort, we spend more training on understanding the opportunities for improvement out of incidents and accidents than just about any other industry.
So you mentioned Boeing 737s, and I'm going to cross out the 737. Let's talk a little bit about Boeing first. Organizational culture, thoughts?
Boeing, there is a Netflix documentary, Downfall. I happen to be in it. And my role there was that of a historian, not a prosecutor. It was a very well done documentary of the evolution that went on at Boeing that caused the erosion in the safety culture. It started, if when you go back to the even as far as the 747, they were an engineering company that happened to be financially successful, but they
Sure.
built airplanes. That's what they did. They were some of the finest engineers in the world.
Sure.
After the acquisition of McDonnell Douglas, they became a financial company that, by the way, happened to build airplanes. The focus shifted.
Sure.
And out of that, the amount of research and development money that went into new airplanes was decreased. The focus on production, getting them out the door, increased. Things such as the daily in their everyday company news sheet on the front page was the stock price. So the company focus was on building their value, which not a bad focus, but when you're an engineering company with something as complex as craft, maybe that shouldn't be the primary focus. So the culture changed, and out of that came the 737 Max.
Okay. You mentioned in one of your bookends limited cost to keeping Air Force One. It's not a captured budget, it's whatever it takes to keep that safe. With the recent administration coming in and making a lot of changes in our federal government, the Department of Transportation, the FAA, just to name some organizations involved in aviation safety. Do you have any comments about these changes?
The FAA is under, they're in an incredibly difficult situation. Technology is evolving. We're seeing the increase of unmanned vehicles in the national airspace system. We're seeing air traffic controller shortages. And I'll come back to that because I'll lay that at
Okay.
the feet of Congress.
All right.
But you also are seeing, so that you have a technology evolution, you have the ability to control traffic being limited by technology. You also see that there have been a number of cuts and a number of retirements. So they're not only having to do more with less, they're having to prioritize what they can do based on the assets available. And those are tough choices when you're dealing with something as critical as aviation safety. So there have been tough choices, there are tough choices, there are going to be tough choices. And I am very hopeful that the process by which they set the priorities up is sound and is based in fact and not in politics. So let me go back to the FAA issues and air
Yes.
traffic. When FAA goes to Congress and they said, we need X amount of dollars. And Congress says, well, okay, you can have 80% of this, but no more. And by the way, you may not even get that because you haven't spent what was allocated last year. Some of these programs take years to have the design, the manufacturer, implementation, training before they become effective. And when you go to a vendor and you say, I want a new radar system for everywhere in the United States, glad to do it. It's going to be a 10-year program and it's going to cost X dollars. And during that 10 years, the congressional allocation varies wildly, where you have to go back to the vendor and say, I know we were going to do 20 radars this year. I can't pay you but for 11.
Okay.
What do you get? You get, this cycle of up and down, and it didn't take 10 years, it takes 15. So you're 50% over. Was it the vendor's fault? Was it the FAA's fault for oversight? Or is the funding pipeline so cyclical and so driven by things other than recognizing the imperative nature of a steady stream budget to things such as aviation safety? This is critical infrastructure. So,
Absolutely.
and so when you do that, and then you come back and you say, we have all these problems, as a safety person that has seen a number of these cycles across many different administrations. I'm not picking one administration or another,
Understand.
but you want to go back to Congress and say, you're complaining about a problem you created. So let's put the aviation safety budget, let's make it where it's a line item and it goes up by cost of living or as the increase in the cost of equipment and people as it escalates, that there are escalation clauses in it. But let's simplify and reduce the cyclical nature of funding for something as critical as aviation safety.
Okay. You've mentioned in a number of different places that aviation safety lessons have applications far beyond the cockpit. What can business leaders and politicians, especially in high stakes environment, learn from aviation safety culture? Okay.
Because no one wants errors, no one wants mistakes because they're expensive. You have to go back and redo something. So if you make the investment to manage those changes, and part of safety management systems is just that, it's change management. And then it is also a subset of that is the management of change. Two different things. So
Okay.
how are you managing the upcoming changes that are ahead in your industry, whatever that is? Because every industry evolves. If you stay stagnant, you're losing ground because your competitors are going to be going forward. So there's constant change, and how you manage that effectively from an operational and risk standpoint. Are you evaluating where your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities and threats are in a risk matrix? because that's what it is. And so you can look at things such as, if you look at the nuclear industry, they have, I think it's 28 plants in the country. They are totally intolerant of accidents, but
Absolutely. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
cost of setting up a nuclear plant is prohibitive. And that's the reason that you haven't seen but one or two in the last 20 years come online. So
Mhm. Sure.
you have to balance the cost effectiveness and return on investment with the operational benefits of effective safe risk management. So, and one industry that has done that probably more effectively than anybody else is aviation. Maritime is coming up, but they don't have the regulatory, and part of it is working with the regulator. The maritime
Sure.
industry doesn't have the depth of regulatory requirement that aviation does. The nuclear has even more than aviation. So where does your industry fit in there? And I hear this a lot. Oh, that's not required. Do you want to be a company that only does the minimum required? If the answer to that is yes, then
Yes.
you are
Mhm.
going to be the proverbial, the cheapest thing in the market. The problem with that is there's always somebody that'll figure a way to be cheaper. The quality. So now you have to get your customer to say, I'm willing to pay a premium for this quality. And how do you assure that quality? Safety management.
All right. Excellent. You've been a longtime analyst for major networks. I mentioned earlier, you've helped the public understand aviation in moments of both crisis and clarity. What's the biggest misconception about airline safety you hear repeatedly in the media?
Because we have become so safe. I mean, we're right now, we experience about one accident in every 10 million flights, something like that.
Wow, that's
Well,
absurd. I knew it
if
was
you
safe, but I didn't know the stats on that. Great. Huh.
think about where we started. The Wright Flyer in 1903 was virtually destroyed after its fourth flight. One
Right.
major accident every four flights. That's where we started. And we are now better than one accident every 10 million flights. And in 2023, we flew 35 million jet airline flights without a single fatality or single accident, zero in 35 million flights. The consequence of that is now when there is an event, serious incident or accident, the media hypes it to the point because they are so rare. So we're a victim of our own success in that way.
Hmm.
However, there's also the fear factor because most people don't understand. They see this large aluminum tube that weighs thousands and thousands of pounds, and it somehow hoists itself into the air at unimaginable speeds. And they get to go see their grandmother, which is a wonderful thing, but it looks to them to be magic. So what caused the magic to fail? There's an inherent, in a lot of people, there's an inherent mistrust or fear factor because they're not in control. When you board an airliner, you give up control. Well, you
Yes.
also give up control when you go in a hospital for surgery. You give
Sure.
up control. If you are involved in a criminal prosecution, you give up control. So it's not unprecedented that we relinquish control in certain areas where we have professionals, highly trained
Mhm.
professionals that are qualified to do that work. Aviation has those professionals, but there's still the fear factor. And then, the airplane will experience turbulence and everybody thinks the wing's going to come off and the magic's going to fail when in fact it won't. So there's misconceptions. And that's part of my job as an analyst is to explain aviation in a way that a lay audience can understand it and to alleviate some of those unfounded concerns and fears.
All right. So let's talk a little bit more about that. It's been a long time, several years, since I have heard of a airline or an aviation mishap. Not that they don't come, but it was very minor. But over the last few months, and I'm talking about the first half of
Mhm.
2025,
Mhm.
just to name a couple, we've had the Army helicopter right over there by Reagan Airport in Washington,
Mhm.
D.C., hit a regional airline, midair collision, which it's almost unheard of for decades. Then, of course, the recency, the Air India of a 787. And then a couple of other type of non-airline but private aviation incidents that was very public. You can see that on social media as well as the network news. Any comments on why all of a sudden in the last few months there's been all these accidents and incidents when just prior to that, for months and years?
2025 has been a very dramatic year for aviation. We started in January with the tragic midair collision of the CRJ and the Army helicopter. Air traffic control has been under a lot of scrutiny for that. But in fairness, it was the Army helicopter pilots that requested to maintain visual separation. And when they do that, they are now responsible, solely
Absolutely.
responsible
Yes.
for maintaining visual separation. So can we make procedural changes to improve it? I think that that's already underway. If you look at the Delta Airlines CRJ in Toronto, that's still under active investigation, and there's still some uncertainty about exactly what happened there. But recognize one thing, everybody got out of that. Pretty much. They were banged up a little bit, but for
Yes.
the most
Yes.
part, that airplane was built well, it was certified well to be able to withstand an accident like that and protect the passengers. So it says volumes about the resilience and robustness of the safety structure within aviation that most people don't think about when they go through the boarding door. If you look at the South Korean 737, it appears
Sure.
that they lost both engines due to birds, and they still managed to get it on the runway. Phenomenal airmanship on the part of the crew. What they didn't expect, nor would any of us, is there was a concrete berm off the end of the runway. And so when they couldn't get stopped, they basically ran into a solid concrete wall. Who would have expected that? So, that's hard to blame on aviation other than airports should maintain runway clear areas in the event of overruns. They need to be able to tolerate an aircraft overrun, and sadly, in this case, they didn't. But so there was that one. Then, the recent Air India airplane is very strange on
Yes.
around it. There
Yes.
is a lot of concern by the Indian government, but also the Indian population, that this is going to be a serious black mark against them and their commitment to aviation safety. So they're hypersensitive to it, and social media has gone berserk on conspiracy theory. I mean, I'm waiting to read somebody that says they can definitively prove that the aliens got it. So it this is it's a bit of our own creation because we have been so safe. Now anything that happens is front page news for days, weeks, months. And that's what we're seeing with Air India. As far as what happened there, doing research, I cannot find a case on any Boeing airplane that uses this type of switch, which is the 737 MAX, 757, 767, Boeing 777, and 787, that has ever in the history of any of those fleets, which go back 40 plus years, that has ever had one of those switches uncommanded shut down an engine, much less two of them. The likelihood is something other than a malfunction in the switch caused those engines to shut down.
So like a software, which is
There's no common soft. There's no
yeah,
common software.
right.
It is more
So
likely
hardwired.
that a person manipulated those switches. Why all of that? That's the ongoing part of the investigation. I've been an investigator for too long. I'm not going to speculate on it because we
Okay.
don't have sufficient data to speculate on it.
Okay.
So, but what we do know is facts, and we
Sure.
know that the airplane took off normally. The airplane initial climb was normal. We know
Yes.
from the preliminary report those switches translated to cut off. They rested there for 10 seconds and then they went back to run. And amazingly, David, the left engine restarted. It shouldn't have. They were going much too slowly to get what's known as a windmill start, and that engine restarted. I was amazed. But the airplane did everything it was supposed to. It protected electrically so that they could control it. They were able to get an engine restarted. All of the redundant systems in the 787 functioned as designed. So even though this is a horrible tragedy, there are lessons learned on what went right and what went wrong. We don't know the full story yet. We will. The Indian authorities are doing a good job. The preliminary report was a good report, objective, and stated only what they knew. It's exactly what it should be, as dictated by the International Civil Aviation Organization. So the the investigation's proceeding as it should, and we'll get the answers. It's just a matter of being patient.
So I want to say maybe 4 days ago, the Wall Street Journal came up with an article. Don't know if you had a chance to uh, take a look at that, but they were pointing more towards the crew, the senior captain. And I know this is all speculation. The Indian government has, come back, hitting the Wall Street Journal in that article pretty hard in terms of how they don't believe that that should have been published. Just any thoughts about the article yourself?
Well, I know the reporter. I've worked with him over many years,
Okay.
and I've spoken with him about the article. They stand by it. They say that they had enough information to where they believe it to be factual. He asked me my opinion. I said, I think you're pretty far out on the limb, but that, and he indicated that he was a little surprised how much, how many people have believed that to be a complete indictment of the captain when he alleges that they were not necessarily trying to do that, but to raise the possibility that it was the captain.
I see.
That's his position.
Yeah.
Now, if you talk to the Indian authorities, if you talk to the pilots union, if you talk to, and I've got friends that fly for Air India, if you
Okay.
talk to them, they will all tell you that they read it as stinging indictment and
Yes.
maligning the crew that was very unambiguous and very intentional. And then the follow-ups are that the Western media is trying to protect Boeing. And I mean, that's where the conspiracy
Wow.
theories go
Okay.
nuts. But it was interesting to me to listen to so many people what the takeaway of that article was versus what the reporter that wrote it intended for it to be.
Okay.
Clearly, the Wall Street Journal article added fuel to the grave concern of India as a nation about what could have happened here. This is not unlike Egypt when the Egypt Air 990 incident happened. Egypt
Yes.
to this day denies that it was a pilot suicide when there's overwhelming evidence that it was. So there's a matter of national pride in here too.
Fair enough. You've been a regular contributor to Air Disaster, one of my favorite shows, and USA Today. Ask the Captain. How do you balance technical accuracy with public education when the spotlight is on, such as the Air India and the Egypt Air and a slew of other accidents and incidences that we've been talking about?
You have to be accurate. That's first and foremost. That starts with as an accident investigator. But my jobs in the media usually is that of a translator, is to
Mm.
take that technically accurate information and put it into a format that makes sense to lay audience. And so you use an analogy such as in your car, when you're talking about an autopilot, use the analogy of cruise control in your car. It's things like that. When you start talking about, as an example, risk management. I do this frequently with classes that I teach. How many people in here have a car? And everybody raises their hand. How many people in here, last time you drove, wore a seatbelt? And everybody raises their hand. And I go, why? You didn't have an accident last time, the last time you drove, or the time before, or the time before. Why are you wearing a seatbelt? And they get kind of quiet, and it's like, where are you going with this? I
Yeah.
said, you're mitigating risk. You are reducing this likelihood of severity. You're reducing the severity of injury by wearing a seatbelt. Same thing's true with anti-lock brakes. You're
Sure.
reducing the likelihood of having an accident because the automobile stops faster and stops under better control than a car without anti-lock brakes. That's risk management. So It's when you put it in terms like that, then you stay technically accurate always, but you also translate it into language that the public can and will understand.
Fair enough. Looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest aviation safety challenges or opportunities that this industry will face in the next 5 to 10 years and longer, next decade?
The air traffic control piece is certainly part of it, but I
Sure.
think to an even greater degree is going to be the integration of unmanned vehicles in our airspace.
Those
Because
include drones.
there are more and more of them coming, and that technology is evolving much more rapidly than the regulatory framework can evolve. So the regulators are already behind the technology curve, and that's not going to get better in the near term. So that means we're going to have thousands of more aircraft in our airspace. And if the smaller ones, you can't tell that they're there. They don't broadcast their position. And,
Right.
we've seen things such as airliners hitting small drones while landing at Los Angeles and in Europe and several places. That one has to stop. But two, we have to figure a way to allow those into our airspace system because they're coming whether we want them to or not. But that whole means by which we integrate them is not clear. That pathway is not clear. Continued improvements in pilot training, and the continued expansion of safety management systems, those are all critical components to not only keeping the safety level that we have today, but improving it and actually making it better. Because as safe as we are today, it's not safe enough for tomorrow.
Excellent. Any final comments?
No, thank you for the invitation. I've enjoyed it.
Fantastic. Viewers and listeners, thank you for joining us on this very insightful episode of Jet Setting Wealth Advisory Podcast. A very heartfelt thank you to Captain John Cox. Your work continues to shape safer skies, industries all over the world. And to learn more about John Cox consulting work or to connect with safety operating systems, please check the links in the show notes. Captain Cox, do you have a website that you'd like to share?
Yeah, it's www.safeopsys.com, SAFEOPSYS.com. Cox@safeopsys.com.
And for the viewers, that should be in the screen that you see. This is David Yu, airline pilot, founder, and wealth advisor of DTY Wealth Planning Solutions. Please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow aviation professionals and leaders looking to elevate their impact. Until next time, stay the course, think strategically, and continue building your wealth with confidence and purpose. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for flying with us on today's episode of Jet Setting Wealth Advisory. If you enjoyed your journey through the fiscal skies with David T. Yu, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and keep your financial knowledge soaring. For more insights and personalized advice, visit us at www.dtywealthplanningsolutions.com and connect with David directly